Hey, this is Adam Torres, and I'm here to tell you that it has never been easier to start your very own podcast. At Mission Matters, our goal is to amplify stories that matter. That means we want to help you start your podcast because your story matters. We can do this in 3 different ways. 1, join our podcast school and take a free or paid course. 2, visit our resources page where we've already figured out what you need, such as where to host your podcast. Or 3, heck, we can even do everything for you through our podcast agency, including editing for cheaper than you can do in-house. Oh, and no contract, service is month to month. Get started by heading over to missionmatters.com and click on Start a Podcast. All right, now let's get into the show.
Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Mission Matters Business Podcast, your source for all things business. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at AskAdamTorres to keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that other good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, missionmatters.com, and click on Become an Author to apply. All right, so today is a very special reunion 2020 episode. What is that? That's when I had a guest on in the past, and I liked him so much I had to invite him right on back. Today's special return guest is Marcus A. Wright, and he's an executive coach and CEO over at Marcus A. Wright LLC. Marcus, welcome back to the show.
Adam, thanks so much for having me back. I really appreciate it.
Oh, man, so it's great to have you back on. It's been at least a year since we last spoke, so excited to catch up and talk about your new company and what you're doing. But before we do that, for the listeners that maybe didn't catch your first episode, all our new listeners, let's start off with a little bit more on your background. Tell us how you got started in your career in business.
Well, Adam, I actually got started in my career in business about 4 years ago. I actually was a project manager for about 20 plus years, and I kind of been coaching people for a very long time. I would say about 15 years. And then I was like, you know what? You need to break away from this and do you. You need to be yourself. So about 3 or 4 years ago, I started my company, which was JH Consulting, and then since then on this journey, I've learned that I need to rebrand myself. And of that rebranding in the birth, Marcus A. Wright LLC started out. And I have a whole new identity as far as my coaching and what I do and what I offer folks. So that's been my journey.
That's awesome. And I think that's a great transition. Let's just dive right in. So tell us a little bit more about the company and how you're helping people.
Well, like I said, Marcus A. Wright LLC, I am an executive coach. I do leadership coaching. And what I do now, I work with people on their emotional intelligence and their DISC assessment. So basically, I work with them to help them understand how to lead and how to work with teams from an emotional perspective. And then I work with them so that they can learn to communicate from the DISC so they understand their personality style, which helps them understand their communication because each one is different. One is emotional. When you're emotional, you have to learn your emotions and how you're doing with things and become self-aware. And the other one, you need to kind of understand what your personality is like. So I take a twofold approach. And I work with executives and teams on how to recognize both their strengths in both those areas.
That's awesome. And so at the end of this, I'm going to give you the opportunity to leave your website or social or email, wherever you want to direct traffic to. But I want to make sure that the right types of individuals and or organizations connect with you. What are the right types of companies and people that you like working with?
I like working with companies that are recognizing the executives and the leadership team. They're recognizing that, hey, there's things going on that we need to make some changes. Look at today's world, right? We have so many different things going on with COVID, with women feeling that they're still not getting their just due. And in some cases, there's some systemic racism, even though people don't want to talk about those things because that's the elephant in the room, and that's a very tough conversation. So what I do, working with teams, companies, I help them by understanding, taking them through an assessment so their leaders can understand how their style is to work with their teams. So I work with all types of companies, Fortune 500s, individuals, smaller companies, small and mid-sized. It's whatever's needed, and I go to the companies and work with them by just helping them understand where they're trying to go.
That's awesome.
And how their teams need to work together.
I mean, it's needed in the marketplace. So I think what you're doing is great. What do you think? And I know this is it's I don't want this to seem like a loaded question, but I know when you're working with people for a long time, then you you see certain patterns tend to arise. What are some of those things that you see happen over and over at companies that when you go in there and help them, that when you get there, you're like, oh, I can help here. Like this can be solved.
When I first get there, I start to, I observe first. But what I learn and what I'm seeing is that leadership, the folks that are in leadership, they have some issues that they need to work with, some things they need to work on as far as self-awareness. You see them leading and trying to work with their team to get things done and telling their employees what they need to do. But you also see that some of those leaders lack empathy or self-regard or self-actualization. And some of them have issues with decision-making, or trying to handle all their stress. So I noticed that right off the bat, and what I do is I take them through an assessment to help them to become self-aware. So my whole training is all about activating your self-awareness, because if you can activate your self-awareness and understand who you are as a person, as a leader, you become a more effective leader, because then you develop your skills, and you start to realize that maybe I'm not as empathetic to this person that I needed to be when we were discussing the issues that came up. Mm-hmm. Or maybe when I talked to, John didn't recognize that he was doing some things that, we thought he shouldn't do, rather than have a conversation with him to try to understand what his thought process is or was. I kind of just give him direction and say, here's what I want you to do. Well, when you do that, you have taken yourself out of it, meaning you've not allowed yourself to have some type of self-assessment, some self-awareness to understand that maybe John is going through something right now. Let me try to figure out what's happening so we can both make the right decision together. I'm not saying leaders need to be counselors, but I am saying leaders need to understand themselves so that when they're working with their employees, they can be more empathetic and help with decision-making and stress tolerance and self-actualization. And when that happens, you get a more happy workplace. That environment changes immensely. So that's my goal when I go in.
Man, that's awesome, and it makes a lot of sense. So, Marcus, that being said, if somebody is listening to this and they want more information about working with you and your team, I mean, what's the best way for them to reach out and to connect?
Well, you can hit me on my website at marcusawright.com. My Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter are all Wright Mentality, and that's WRIGHT Mentality. And, of course, my LinkedIn is Marcus A. Wright.
Fantastic. Well, Marcus, it's awesome having you back on the show for this Reunion 2020 episode. It's been great catching up with you, and congrats on the new direction and the rebrand and all the great things you're doing there. I know you're going to help a lot of companies. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you got a lot of value out of this. If you did, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, leave me a review in the Apple iTunes store, and if you're watching this on our YouTube channel, Mission Matters Business, definitely give us a subscribe there, but also leave us some comments in the video. I'd love to know what kind of projects and things that you're working on. And Marcus, thanks again for coming on the show.
Adam, thanks for having me again. I really appreciate it.